Alright, connection's holding. I think I may have fixed it. It's taken me a couple of days, but I think I fixed it. OBS reckons it's fine. I'm watching the numbers. It should be okay. So, I don't know why it never occurred to me, but Wi-Fi and streaming, baseline So, Ethernet exists. And I realised not long after the Wi-Fi cut for the third time, I could just get an Ethernet cable and run it across to where the router is in the main house. So I've done that. It's another cable that I now have just trailing scratch, it's difficult to alter things that exist. Because it's also worth noting that, say, for example, you happen to find a long dress out in a charity shop and you think, oh my god, that skirt is perfect, amazing. And you might even go and try it on, and it all fits really well, and the skirt looks perfect and exactly like your reference, and you just think, brilliant, cool, I'll just, you know, cut some slits up the sides and then I have it, amazing. But that doesn't account for the sleeves. And then because you have something that is a one of one, because it's a random charity shop find, how are you going to match that fabric? You're literally not. So when you go looking for these kinds of things in charity shops, you must always, always, always look for something that has the most amount of fabric in it. The way that the skirt on a dress looks and sits on you and the way it hangs does not matter, because you have the ability to change that so long as there's enough fabric there to begin with. And that's the way that you have to approach this. You're not dress shopping, you are fabric shopping. So a lot of the fabric that I get will be from charity shops, but also it's like curtains and other furnishing fabrics, because there are so many of them just hanging about on rails, and you can, like curtains especially, there will be an outer and a lining fabric, so you get two different kinds of fabric in one purchase, and a lot of it, which is great. So I've got a bunch of curtains just lying around. I'm actually going to be using one of them for something else, which I'll get around to eventually. But yeah, so totally valid approach, but don't look at it as finding a completed garment, because A, you shouldn't, and B, it literally is not, no, it's not possible. Like, it's just not. Things like this are too specific, you will not find something that is exactly the same. Like, even if I went out and found a really long bathrobe that could be perfect, because the skirt is an all-round affair, having an opening at the front, you're not going to have enough fabric, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you're just not. Even if you were to dismantle it from the waist and sort of spin it so that that opening was one of the V-shapes at the front, you're still not going to have enough by the time it comes to having, like, the really flowy sleeves, because there's no way that a bathrobe is going to taper out that early on for the sleeves. Like, it's just not. So you won't have enough fabric to then make those sleeves. So always keep that as your prerogative. You're looking for fabric, not for the final thing. But having these now, I've got samples for the kind of thing that I can look for. So... And then when it comes to patterns, this is something else that is useful. So if I were to take this one as my example, right? Something you will always find with any pattern that you ever get is a whole load of numbers on the back of the envelope. And these will be all of the body measurements and size charts, but also it will tell you how much fabric you should use based on those numbers. So, for example, I have here, my mate has said that her dress size, on top she's a 14, and on the bottom she's a 16. Cool. So I would then look to this chart, and I would find where that size comes up, and then I would see how much fabric it recommends I get based on that size. So, extremely useful info to have, because you always end up needing way more fabric than you think you do for these kinds of things. And even with 16 years of experience making this shit, I will criminally underestimate how much fabric it will take to make a thing. So I will always go with what I think is right, and then add an extra couple of meters on top of that because I don't trust me. And then it kind of works out from there. So, yeah. But having these eliminates a lot of that. But then again, you have to consider that all of that is based exclusively around these. It's got nothing to do with how you're planning on Frankensteining bits, or if you're adding stuff on or taking things away. It's only in reference to exactly what it's telling you. So use it as a guide, but don't rely on it. Unless you're using the pattern exactly as it stands, in which case, well, hey, amazing, crack on. But that doesn't tend to be how things go in cosplay terms. It tends to be very much, you just take bits from other patterns because they happen to be applicable to something specific, and then you alter it, and yeah, that's that. So, yeah. At least then you have some idea of what you're working to. So, as far as that goes, that's kind of my my rundown on, I suppose, planning your fabrics and finding relevant patterns, and always check your references. Yeah, that's that side of things. I'm going to keep these somewhere safe. Probably in here for now. And, yeah. That's how that goes. So that's the, like, super basics around just looking at your fundamentals, right? The next thing to think about is how it all goes together. So, you know what you want for your fabrics, and you know roughly how much you're going to need based on the patterns that you've got and all that good stuff. The next thing you need to think about is... I can get the lid off my bloody pen. So the next thing to think about is the... it's the construction, which sounds obvious, but I mean it in a little more depth than just how the pattern will tell you to put things together. Oh hey, what's up? You're up 3 minutes early. I'm gonna have a drink. Ugh. Don't know how you can yap for this long. My throat hurts. I've only got one eye open. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I'm just, I'm taking the opportunity to do a little cosplay 101, because that's something I can yap about. So, you know. Yes, no, I saw your message. I'm just shit and I never replied. So, that's a plus. How did that pan out, though? Was it just like a congrats, okay, bye, or were there any, like, suggested steps going forward? That is hilarious. I didn't think that could even be a thing. Like, I've never heard of that before. So that's impressive. On the waitlist for meds, okay. 10 to 12 months. Okay. Fun times. Yeah, that's pretty cringe. Yeah, oish. Fair play. But at least it's in motion, so it's something that will end up happening, rather than just being in the void. Okay, yeah, that's good. I actually, reading reading those three things, they're all things that you're bad at, like inherently bad at. So, actually, good luck with that. That's going to be a disaster. Jeez. Yes, yes, you are. You are criminally bad at all of them. That's gonna be a total shit show. uh, I don't know. I am I a bad friend for laughing at that? Because I feel like that's actually fairly justified. Like it is going to be just an actual mess. Fun to watch though. Yeah. Oh, good. Well, as long as you laughed as well, then that's fine. And yeah, no, I feel that. I'm trying to think how my so I think food wise, I remain shit. I'm hungry now, but I'm busy, so and I also really need to pee, but I'm busy, so I just haven't gone. Um, Exercise, I sorted out myself because I had bodily motivations. And then sleep came with the exercise routine because I had to go to bed at a certain time to get up early so that I could go to the gym and not have to deal with other people. So yeah, two of three. It's not the worst. Um, yeah, no, that is extremely real. That is just how that works. There's no escaping that. You never really get around that. I think the only way that I have gotten around that is with hard cut-offs, which are usually based around my sleep schedule, um, or other obligations. So yeah, no, exactly. There are there are worse things to end up just fixated on. So that's fair enough. That is fair enough. It's better than Sims, I guess. I see. Okay. That's not a bad strat. I mean, I have my morning alarm is threefold. So I it goes off 10 minutes before I actually need to get up. And then it's like at the foot of my bed. So I get up to turn off the first one, and then I go back to sleep. And then the second one goes off 5 minutes later, again at the end of my bed, and I'll turn that off. And then the last one is on the other side of my room, which I actually have to get out of bed to then go and turn off. So that's how I get up every morning. Yeah, yeah. No, timers are definitely like the best way of doing stuff. It's why like with the whole stream premise, having a set schedule is primarily so that I am obliged to keep to certain things. Because otherwise I'll just be here all day and I won't leave. So okay, yeah. No, and that's another thing, right? Is like the perception of time. I I cannot perceive time. It is a totally alien concept. Um, you could stick me in a room for 5 minutes and I couldn't tell you how long I'd been there for. And when it comes to stuff like this, that becomes a living nightmare. Because, you know, deadlines exist. And if I don't know how long something's going to take, then... So, yeah. Yeah, no, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. And the way that I've found to get around it these days is, like, if it's something that I'm fairly familiar with, like sewing things, then I will look at how long I think something is going to take me. Then I will take half of that time and add it on to the end, and assume that that is how long it will actually take me. And then I will try and get it done in that time, but I will allow double that time just in case. Because I'll probably need it. So, yeah, no, genuinely, like, I can't perceive the passage of time. It's why I'm constantly checking, like, the stream timer to see how long I've been going, because I don't know. I have no other way of knowing. Yeah, no, massively, massively. Like, I've been really bad at meeting my D&D lot on time recently, so I will aim to be ready a full hour before I need to go anywhere, because then I will probably end up being half an hour early, and that's about right. So that's what I've been operating on, because otherwise I just end up late. But then also, it's worth pointing out that, like, you know how I always used to get to work obscenely early? It's the same thing, just in reverse. So, just because I never rocked up to work late doesn't mean that I'm good at timekeeping. I'm not. I just am always freakishly early instead. So, you know, it's just a different degree of being shit. But it's like the more socially acceptable one. Yeah, no, see, that's my personal hell. Like, when it comes to meeting up with mates and stuff, it's fine, because they know I suck and I don't have to sweat over it a whole bunch. But when it comes to, like, actual obligations, nah. I will be freakishly early, and that's it. Oh my god, no, that's the kind of thing that I have, like, actual nightmares about. No. Nah, see, I do that. It doesn't matter what it is or where I am, I will always put shit in my calendar as soon as it crops up, because if I forget, no. The actual worst. So, no, I can't be doing that. And then I have, like, the reminders set for the day before, an hour before, and 10 minutes before. That's obscenely lucky. That is obscenely lucky. No. See, if I get somewhere 5 minutes early, then I am late. Like, that is late, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, no. No, that is the worst. That is actually hell. Yeah, genuinely. Minimum 20 minutes early to everything, always. Minimum. Yeah, nah. I feel that. I feel that in my soul. Especially when you don't have anything to, like, actually keep you to something rigid. Ah, see, I got you beat on that one. But that's only because I require solitude first thing in the mornings, so I have to get to bed at a certain time to get up at, like, midnight. So sleep is fine. I can deal with sleep. Until you consider that I woke up an hour after that. But yeah, but then that's my standards are not normal, not by any stretch. So yeah, nah, I suppose that's fine probably for most people. 7 hours is good. That's good. But then I I find 7 is too much for me. But I don't know whether that's like, whether that's because like if you look it up, some people say that that's part of the ADHD thing, is that like you can operate on less sleep. But I don't know whether that's legit or whether that's just cope. Because I want to be doing stuff with my time, and sleeping is not doing stuff. So I don't want to do it. So it might just be cope. And I've managed to convince my body that it's real. I don't know. I don't know. But 7 hours, roll with the 7 hours. I think that's fine. It's definitely better than a lot of people. Yeah, no, I that's how I feel. Okay. Yeah, no, see, I'm pretty consistently, like, between 4 and 5. I think 5.5 is, like, the sweet spot, but I can manage on 4, and 4.5 is okay, so, you know. But yeah, no, any more or less than that, and I just feel so gross. Like, it's that feeling of, like, if you've been ill for a couple of days and it feels like you haven't brushed your teeth. You have, but it feels like you haven't. It's that feeling. That kind of like, bleh. It is just absolutely that. Yeah, see, that that's something that I'm getting to be quite careful with. Because I don't know whether I said this to you while you were at work, or because I know I said it to Grace and she laughed. But I find that I'm like a shark, and if I stop swimming, I'll die. So throughout a day, I just don't stop swimming. It's why I don't sit down. It's why I never sat down while I was at work. Even on lunch, I would stand and have my lunch because I refused to stop because I would just not start up again. So, yeah, nah, it's it's a real thing. And it's why, like, in here now, I don't have any chairs. I don't use them. There's no reason for me to have chairs in here. I don't want to be sitting down because I will just pass out. Yeah, exactly. You have to keep going. You have to keep going. It's just, especially like in the prime of the day. So like for me, the mornings are the best time to be doing stuff. So during the mornings, I will just not stop. I won't step away to do anything else. I will just continue the whole time I can be doing stuff. And then like when it gets to having lunch, okay, cool. But as soon as I've had lunch, I have to then go and do something physical to keep myself awake. So I tend to save like housework or anything that's kind of obnoxious and requires me to move a lot of stuff, I'll do in the afternoons because it requires me to be physically engaged with it. Because anything that is just mental engagement is not enough to keep me on this astral plane. Like, it just isn't. So, I do get that. I definitely get that. Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely feel that. Um, it's why, like, there's a load of stuff that I need to do that is computer based that I just haven't done because I don't want to sit to do it and then become lost within the void because I know I will be. Yeah. No, literally, like, I will fall asleep with my eyes open, basically. And then an amount of time has passed and I couldn't tell you how much. Yeah, no, standing desks honestly are great. I'd considered getting one for my bedroom, um, but also for the amount of time now that I actually spend at my PC, doesn't matter a whole bunch. Like I would rather be out here doing things and then I am standing anyway, so it's whatever. Plus, I quite like my desk. It's cool. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's all the little bits and pieces that, you know, maybe eventually, but for now, it's like, I've been looking at a lot of this as, what are the priorities? Having a workspace, to be honest. You tried. You definitely tried. Um, so props for the attempt, but you did in fact spell that wrong. Yes. Um, I can see where your head was at though, and at least you recognised it. So yeah, that's fine. It's all good. I'd say don't worry about it, but you know, I am judging you. No, you never told me that. That's hilarious. Oh my god. That's so rough. Okay, alright. But you are managing to type everything else, so that to me feels like copium. Great. I'm sure that's fine. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I feel like I'll let's make this the communal cope jar, because otherwise I'm not going to get through this fast enough. So there you go. Have a token. Because I don't have enough in there at the minute. I've not been coping as much as I usually do. Although I did put a couple in there this morning as like retroactive cope. So well, I mean, I don't know what defines dyslexia, but wouldn't knowing that it's wrong kind of be a plus? Like is the recognition part of why it's not technically I don't know. Yeah, okay, okay. Because like my nan definitely is dyslexic. Um, but then even she will stop every now and then and be like, "I'm pretty sure that's wrong," but it's only for things that are like very obviously wrong. she's had some really interesting ones. But yeah, I don't know because I'm definitely not, so I can't contribute to that. See, I I have the reading thing. I have the reading thing, but my assumption is that that's the ADHD because my brain is trying to skip ahead and my eyes aren't fast enough, or vice versa. So, yeah. So that's why I think I do it, because I will read something and then it won't have been committed to memory because I'm too busy trying to find out what the next thing is. So, yeah. Yeah. So then I have to go back and reread it and like actually notice the words that are there. So like if I'm doing like a public speaking thing, easy peasy, because I can take whatever's in front of me and just read it off and no problem. But if you asked me afterwards what I'd just said, I couldn't tell you. Yeah, literally. So nah. See, public speaking is easy. I'm okay with that. As long as I have something to say, then it's fine. It's why, like, for streaming this morning, I decided that I was just going to yap about the stuff that I am competent in, because that's easy. I have the content. and the speaking side of it is fine. Like, that doesn't bother me. So, yeah, exams, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've had to deal with any exams. Yeah, but then, look, interacting with chat is most of streaming, right? Like, the majority of the time I'm monologuing, and this was the only occasion wherein monologuing was actually easy. The rest of the time, it's like, having people show up just makes my life easier, so, yeah. And also, I'm hoping my connection has been a lot more stable, because I realised that Ethernet exists, so I just went and got a bloody great cable, and I'm just actually directly plugged into the router now, so it should be fine. I don't know why it took me such a long time to figure that out, but yeah. No, it's been really, really rough. So, yeah, right? I don't know why I never made that connection in my head, but then I just had like this total light bulb moment. And yeah, so I assume that's a good thing. I never know. I'm not sure what the numbers mean. Okay, cool. Well then, wow. Damn. That's really something. Was that convincing? I see. And that's right. Cool. As long as the sarcasm still bleeds through, that's all that matters. So I'm at peace with that. That's honestly fine with me. Right. Okay, no, that does make sense. That's that's fair enough. I gotta say, I do not miss uni accommodation. Sharing places with other people is, at a baseline, really shit. But sharing places with students is ungodly. Yeah, nah, it is grim. It is just grim. Like, even if your housemates are totally chill and it's fine, like, it's still the worst. It just is. And it's always like the little things that drive you mental. Like, no one ever washes up their shit. Why? How difficult is it to clean what you've used? Or everyone shares a bin, and then no one wants to take it out, so they just leave the bag in the kitchen, and you're like, why? Why would you do that, though? Like, if you're the last person to put something in the bin, just take the bag out. What does it matter? Yeah, nah, I will never understand. Genuinely. It's just upsetting. No, that's horrendous. No, I can't. Uh-uh. Mm-mm. No. Yeah, nah, that's vile. Under no circumstances. Honestly, like, the the better time was when it was just me and my then partner in a place ourselves. Yeah, it was way more expensive, but at least it was just the two of us and we could keep on top of literally everything. So, no, that's fair. That is fair. That's needs must, innit? So, it is just one of those suck it up, buttercup situations. Take what you can get and all that jazz. Yeah, nah, I don't blame you. That does sound pretty nice, to be honest. Honestly, solitude is wildly underappreciated. Being on your own is nice. Just is. Ah, that sucks. No, I've always been lucky with noise. Like, I can sleep through most things and just not care a whole bunch. Because I'm pretty sure I told you about the taxi situation. Yeah, that's grim. Nah. No, I swear. I swear that was something that I covered on stream. About the taxi crash. I've definitely talked about it recently. Okay. Well, so you know how my house looks, and how there's like the front garden, that little patch of front garden. Yeah, the tree, yeah. So I did. I knew that I had, I just couldn't remember whether it was like on stream or if I'd told somebody else. Yeah, it's the tree. Yeah, it was a taxi. Yeah. So yeah, slept through that. There. Could be either. Or you weren't listening, who knows? It could be any or all of the above. But yeah, it was that. So I can sleep through a lot of nonsense is my point. Jeez. Wow, that's yeah, I'm not sure how I'd respond to that, to be honest. Probably just something to the effect of, yeah. Damn. No, considering how much I've been around, I don't think I've ever witnessed anything in person, which is nice, and I'd like to keep it that way. Yeah, fair enough. Jeez. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I've been held up in traffic because of accidents before, like a whole bunch, but I'm very glad to have never been witness to anything. So, oish, yikes. Yeah, that's aggro that you just don't really need. So, but at least it wasn't more serious for the people involved. No idea, to be honest. I don't know shit about cars and how they go together and all that. It's like I was talking to a mate a while back about learning to fiberglass things, and he'd said that like he was working on a hot rod and was asking if I'd know about X, Y, and Z. It's like, look, I can. The process is a thing that I know, but cars is not a thing that I know. So, you know, Like, if he wants me to help him with the process of fiberglassing stuff, then hell yeah, absolutely go for it. But as far as like applying that to hot rods, I don't know, man. No idea. Fair. That is fair. Yeah. I've never been like particularly interested in cars, to be honest. Oh. Alright, well that came out of nowhere. What's the dealio? Yeah. Yeah. I, I will say though, the advantage of this being done via stream is that I I am a captive audience, but also there's a little break in between the things that you say, so I get a breather. Oh, it's one of those. Gotcha. Yeah, a mate of mine's having to deal with that at the minute as well. So is it another one of those we can outsource this to AI scenarios? Because that seems to be the running theme. Like, we don't need humans to do this anymore. Except you do. Because everyone else that works in the department is like, no, 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 this won't work. And then it doesn't, but no one cares, because even if it's cocking everything up, they still save the money that they would have spent on people, so to them it's still a win, even if their output is actually worse. So, nah, fair enough. I just, I could go on a little tirade about, yeah, that side of things. It's like, okay, so this is really petty, and it's probably just a me thing, but when I was being shown how to deal with INs and stuff, and I was talking to QA, and they were talking about like the incident reports and saying like, oh, just run the basics through AI. I refused. I refused point blank to have AI write for me. No, I will never. I can't do it. I am A, too proud, and B, I refuse to lose the skill. I'm going to continue to exercise my brain and to write things for my damn self. Because I'm not about to lose the ability to articulate shit. That's just not okay. So. Oh, okay, right. Oh no. Oh gee. Well, but then the hazard cards were like more or less phased out not long after you joined. Like they were a massive thing forever, and then it got changed to like just make it an online thing. Um, but back in the day, we used to have quite a lot of fun with the hazard cards. Oh yeah, no, they were definitely dumb, but the things we used to write on them, because there was a quota, right? And that, for God's sake, I'm gonna be spending this whole stream ranting, and it's literally all your fault. But like, there was a quota for how many hazard IDs you're supposed to have identified in a week, which right out the gate is stupid because then you are actively looking for problems, which defeats the entire purpose. Um, yeah, quotas, literally, it's the worst. But in order to meet those targets, we used to make up some really funny hazards. And just write them on the cards and stick them in to file them, and then as long as we were the ones that filed stuff, no one else had to know that we were making shit up, and it was just funny and fine. Exactly. But the argument was always like, no, it just means that you're missing something because there will always be hazards. So fuck yourself, man. Actually fuck yourself. That's so stupid. Yeah, literally. Literally. Like, it's I'm sorry, would you like me to ask the bottles not to break? Like, we stick them in a freezer that goes down to minus 70 degrees. Like, what do you think happens to the molecules in that when you're changing the temperatures and you've got a container that is sealed and pressure exists, and like, that's just going to happen. It's so painful. Yeah, like, and it was just like, it was so irritating. And it was another one of those cases of like management trying to find shitty little problems that they could fix to then add to their stats and make it look like they've been doing something worthwhile, which they never have. Literally never. Like, after the EIS survey, and everyone was like, the numbers that came back on that, everyone was so distraught that the company couldn't ignore it. So instead of fixing any of like the big problems, they put the coffee machine into the canteen. They just put the vending machine in there, and they were like, there, we've now solved a problem. We're going to walk away from all the rest of the serious issues. But they got to tick it because they'd done something. So dense. Yes. Yeah, they had got those. The ones with like the sort of net things over them, right? I never used them though. Because the last I'd seen, they were sat on top of the dishwashers because they needed validating. So we weren't allowed to use them yet. Really? Of course. So it wasn't even fit for purpose. Amazing. Fantastic. That's so funny. And that actually kind of leads into where I had started going with this as a topic. So I choose to use it as a segue into what I was originally talking about, because otherwise I will be here ranting about the lab literally all day. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. That really doesn't surprise me. It was just, every time a problem came up, it was met with a proposed solution that actually just created a new problem, so nothing ever got solved. It was just a different issue that got introduced instead. So, yeah, yeah. No, fair cop. Yes. So, as far as things being fit for purpose, I can get back to discussing how to plan shit like this. So, when it comes to constructing the things that you're making, um, you need to consider what the purpose of the final product is going to be. So, if your plan is to just walk out on stage briefly to compete with something, and you're not intending to wear it like the rest of the day, you're just going to quickly get everything on like a couple hours before you present it, and then that's that, then you have to worry about significantly less than if your intent is to wear something literally all day. So, consider when you're making things the fundamentals. And it seems obvious, but especially with big builds and complicated builds, one of the most important things to ever consider is how you're going to pee. And I appreciate that seems extremely obvious. It gets hideously overlooked constantly. You need to think about that. before you even start, you need to think about that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, if you're going to be wearing something all day, you need to consider basic bodily functions and needs. That also goes for things like eating and drinking and really walking, because that's something else. So there are so many little aspects to just how you're gonna plan the construction of something. So, okay, here's a good example, right? So when I did my Fierce Deity cosplay, making the armor for that, what I had to consider was my range of motion, because I wanted to be able to... I'll use this pen, it's thick enough. So, what I wanted to be able to do was to lift a sword up above my head, right? Now, the armor itself comes round like that, and it's quite wide. So I had to think, okay, if I've got this thing that is just a lump that is sat on me, how am I going to get around that lump to move my arms up to where I need them to be? And if it was one solid mass, the answer is you don't. You can't, because it's just fixed in place. It's got no movement to it. Which is why I did it in pieces that were laced together. Because the lacing means that those pieces can slide over each other. So anytime I lifted something, one piece would separate a little bit from the other, and that provided the movement. So, yeah, that was the fiberglass one. I also really enjoy that as a premise. That's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah, literally engineering. And looking at this outfit that I'm making for my friend, this is something else that comes into play. Not as much, because the range of motion isn't as specific, because it's not a competitive piece and it's not going to matter that much, but it's still a factor. So something that is worth considering is the lower armor pieces and the skirt, because again, if you really have to pee, how do you get out of that to then go and pee, right? So something I've always done, even looking at this, like, you could quite easily just make the skirt and the sleeves into like one robe and it's all part of one thing, and then that's that. Easy enough, sure. But when you then have to go and take it all off to go do something, it becomes a lot more difficult if it's all attached into one thing. If they are pieces that you can remove and the rest stays, it's just a lot easier. So when it comes to designing this, the way that I would approach this is I would have the legs be a lot more segmented, so that whenever you need to take something off, it's just a couple of pieces, and you don't have to worry about stripping the entire thing back just to go to the loo, because you will have to, like, every couple hours, like you just will. So that's a massive consideration. Something else that's a consideration is how you're going to have the skirt go together. Yeah, no, onesies are the worst. Onesies are the actual worst, and it's why that, like, I had one years ago, and I've worn it like twice ever, and then I got rid of it because I don't wear it because it is inconvenient, and it's a prime example of how you're planning to construct something matters so much. Yeah. No, genuinely, like, it's a big deal. So the way that things go together will be dictated by the purpose, right? By the end use. So in this instance, I am making this as something that will be worn around a convention center all day. Okay. So I then need to consider the range of motion that you'll need for that. Primarily walking, right? It needs to be comfortable to walk in, which means that everything needs to be fairly lightweight. Don't want anything that's going to be super cumbersome, but also it needs to be planned to go together in such a way that allows for that range of motion. So, looking at the legs, right, it's important to think about the way that your knees work. You have a knee, you have your thigh, and you have your shins and your calves and whatever, and for you to walk effectively, that has to bend. If you are basing your leg armour just on a straightened leg, and there's no flexibility in that, say that's the knee bit there, then when it comes to trying to walk in stuff, having something that is flat against that is going to end up being uncomfortable. Especially if it comes up too high at the back. Because if you don't account for that at the back and you go to crease your knee, you're just going to end up like pinching against the very top of that piece. So you always need to make sure that, yeah, you can come up kind of straight over the front of the knee, but at the back you have to dip it down lower than it would be. So it ends up more like that. So it's never a straight tube. It's always got to have that curve in it, or it's just going to not work, and you're going to be walking like you're wearing cardboard tubes. So, yeah. Yeah, no, fursuits, like, good grief. Actually, the friend that I'm making this for is a furry, and she goes to, it's a convention called Confuzzled, and like the whole furry thing is something that I am not privy to. So the extent of the information I get from her, it is fascinating. Genuinely, it is fascinating. And the amount of people that are equipped within their suits with like leg bags to pee in throughout the day and things to that effect, that is a level of commitment that I could not handle, to be honest. Like, I could never. I would no. Like, I respect the hustle, but I could not handle that. Yeah, no. Totally. Totally. Although fursuit making is something that was suggested to me because it's a lot of stuff that I would be familiar with just on like the basics around construction and patterning and what have you. So it's something I could do, but it's not something I've ever tried. So I probably would, but as I say, I've never dabbled. I I might at some point, depending on if this friend ends up needing help with something in that vein. But otherwise, I probably won't. I'm not going to rule it out though. It's a maybe. It's a maybe. But yeah, that's another thing. Is the construction for stuff like that? It's all based around the purpose, and there are so many different approaches that you can take to the same thing, but they will vary dramatically depending on what you actually need it to do. So, for the Battle Sisters, looking at the shoulders, they are massive. They are massive, they are in the way, and you can't really get your arms up past them, right? And if you were going to be competing with something like that, and you had a pose that required you to get your arms up high, that is then something you would have to factor into the construction, because you would not be able to have those be static and get your arms past them. They would have to rotate, and that would then be something you'd have to factor into how you make it. So yeah, they'll be hollow, but then you'd still have like that very front ridge. So if it was constructed, say, basically, if it was like a static mantle and it was just that, right? Like, that's a simple way of putting it together, but then they're not going to move. Whereas if you had it so that they weren't connected along one straight piece, they were connected individually, then they could rotate around depending on where you needed them. Yeah. But that's what I mean by the way that you construct stuff. So for me, I'm going to be able to get away with making the entire mantle and the collar as one piece that's joined together, because there's no need for the wearer to have that kind of range of motion. It's not a requirement. So I don't need to do any additional engineering to get things to move separately. Yeah, it is. This is the only kind of engineering that I am actually vaguely proficient in. Anything else, because it tends to involve a lot of numbers and figures, and, you know, the full extent for me is like, measurements, cool. Beyond that, nah. No, I love this. I love this shit, because this is like, it's engineering, but it's also kind of making stuff up as you go along, and that's fun. And it's fun in the same way that, like, when you figure out a solution for a puzzle in a game, and you're just like, yeah, that's satisfaction. That's what I get from stuff like this. Like, kind of disassembling a final result and looking at how I can piece it all back together depending on what I need it to do. So I live for this shit. This is my favourite part of any build, is the planning stuff. And it's what I admitted earlier I should have started with. So I have put a token in my cope jar for that. But yeah, so stuff like this is it's just fun. It's fun, and it's interesting, and it makes you think about an awful lot of stuff. So, something else to consider. If I'm going to be going for just a solid mantle, that's nice. How am I getting that then on and off of the wearer? Because it's more than just the shoulders and the collar that's on this. There's also a bloody great backpack on the back. So, if I were to do all of those in one, that then becomes difficult. Because, yeah, you can say that, like, the opening on the collar is much bigger than the head, so you can get that on and off over the head easily. Yeah, but if you had the backpack on there as well, that then limits where you can manipulate that to get it on and off. You'd end up needing somebody else to help you with it literally every time, because it would stick out too far down, and you'd have to be way more static. Exactly. So more engineering. So the way that I would do this is I would layer things. So I would have the backpack be a separate piece that you put on first. Literally just as like a backpack with a couple of shoulder straps, sling it on like you would any other backpack. Then you put the mantle on after that. And then it hides the straps, and it doesn't infringe the way that you can get the big chunky bit on and off. So those two parts I would do separately. And then once you have the mantle on, you even have the ability to have Velcro on top of the backpack straps that you then slap onto these to make sure this is definitely not going anywhere. So one then holds the other in place. And job's a good one. So that's probably how I'm going to approach this. Yippee indeed. I am getting a drink periodically, because talking for this long just dries my throat out so bad. I don't know how you manage it. Yeah. So that's what I mean when I say the construction. How everything is going to piece together, the order that you have to put things on. Because that will then also be the order in which you take things off. Typically. And that's when I come back to the whole fit for purpose thing. So, yeah. Purpose, oh my god, it matters. That and construction are so intrinsically linked. It's nice to know that this has just always been the case. Nothing has changed. I'm inclined to believe them. Yeah. Yes, so purpose matters. Because this is an all-day wear, being able to go and relieve yourself periodically is going to be a thing. So when it comes to wearing stuff in layers, that's all very well, until you need to take them off. So thinking about the legs is going to be important, and the skirt, it's all going to be important. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me remotely. I think messy is a good description from everything that I've seen. Yeah, no, I'm not even going to pretend to deny that one. That's just accurate. So, something else to think about is personal constraints and physiology. So, you could say, for example, if you had a... hang on, I have to be careful how I phrase this. If you were designing this for someone who was able to stand to pee at a urinal, then you could incorporate that into the way that it's designed, and you wouldn't have to worry so much about how things are taken on and off, because peeing is just objectively easier. But because it's being designed for somebody who has to sit, you then have to figure out what would get in the way of that in that scenario, which in this instance would be basically everything that is on the lower body. So, looking at... yeah, see, the wraparound for the skirt is fine, so the skirt can stay where it is. That's easy peasy. That's no biggie. I mean, I know for my Wave Mother robe, I slung the skirt over my shoulder. that was my whole strap. So, that's fine. But when it comes to actually sitting, where the knees are on the shin guards, that's going to get in the way of you trying to drop your leggings. So, yeah, so that then ends up being an issue. So, you then have to think, okay, well, if I know that those shin guards have to come off to be able to actually go to sit and pee, what is going to be the easiest way of getting those on and off? And that's when you have to start considering sort of quick and easy closures versus things that you have to, like, actually dismantle, and the way that things are layered to go together. So, you know, as another example, if I were to make those shin guards and have them attached to, like, fabric tubes that you slide on and off, that at the start of the day is totally fine, because you'd slide them on, and then you'd put your shoes on, and they've already got, like, the little flanges attached to them, and everything's layered nicely, and it's fine. But if you have to take your shoes off, and take those leg guards off, every single time you need to pee throughout the day, that's gonna suck. So you can't do it like that. So you have to factor in having things easier to disassemble. Depending on your purpose, right? Like I say, if it was just a quick bish bash bosh, I'm only presenting this for a 30-minute affair, then that matters way less. Because chances are, you'll just pee before you get dressed. Cool. Sensible. That's fine. But that's not what this is going to be. This is going to be an all-day thing. So you have to consider everything that's going to end up happening within that day. I'm saying, if you had the shin pieces as something that you slide up and down your leg to get them off, so like they were all one piece, like a tube, basically, then you'd have to slide them on first, and then put your shoes on afterwards. But then that would mean that if you had to go pee, because those knees get in the way, you'd have to take your shoes off to then take the shin guards off, and that's irritating. And you don't want to have to do that. So it's much easier if you have it so that those shin guards come unbuckled, basically. And they are separate pieces that you can remove and set off to one side while you go pee, and then you come back, and then you clip them back on again, and you're done. So, yeah. So, because I'm making this out of foam, yes, they would bend. However, it would also mean that they are much more prone to tearing and extremely prone to creasing. So the knee on these is just a solid part of that shin. It is part of... it's a static piece. It doesn't have any joint to it. So it's basically the same as behind the shin part. So it's like... hang on, where's my one I made earlier? So what it's going to be is like this, right? So this is then the full piece. That is static. It's fused with that front in position. It's not going anywhere. It stays as is. So foam itself can bend, but if this is attached to this, you're risking that joint every time it bends. So you don't want to do that. So the curve would be at the back of the knee, right? So that it allows for your leg to bend, because going that way, that doesn't interfere with anything. That just goes forwards into empty space. Coming back is where it then hits the knee, so it's got a stopping point in that direction. But in that direction, it'll then be fine. So it would be the calf section that would have a chunk taken out from the very back here, so that it would then bend nicely. So I'm saying that if you had this on and you needed to go pee, you can only drop the leggings that you're in to a certain point. Like, they'd stay halfway up your legs, because you can't get them down past these. So it's one of those... it depends how high this will come up the leg as to how much it gets in the way, basically. Yeah. So... and because they come up quite high in the references, it's probably going to end up annoying and... well, depending on how long their legs are. So, like, for me, this would be much less of an issue, because I have pretty long legs. My friend does not. Her legs are not long. She's quite close to the ground. So this is something I then have to consider, because if she can't pull her leggings down far enough, she's just going to be stopped from being able to go pee, and that sucks. So, yeah. So that matters. Yeah, I didn't think it mattered, but tall toilets are upsetting. I didn't think it was something I would ever notice or be bothered by, but they are actually upsetting. It has a great effect on your ability to relieve yourself, and I didn't realise it would have that much of an effect. Yeah, that is bizarre. But it's also a little more bizarre that I know exactly what you mean. Oh, oh, no, yeah, that's extremely upsetting. Jeez. I hadn't considered toilets in other countries. Why would I think about that to begin with? You're doing that thing again. You're derailing. Stop it. Why am I thinking about toilets in Italy? That's not why I'm here. God's sake. I read that he in your voice, so smooth. Anyway, you get the picture. No, no, because I would need a bucket, not a jar, and I don't have enough tokens to fill a bucket, so that's just not gonna happen. But anyways, you get the point. That's how this goes. You make it a lot easier to talk. I'll give you that. Although this was the one occasion where I could just kind of go for a while, because I have a lot to say about this kind of stuff. Like, this side of things is... This is the yappable stuff, you know? This is the kind of thing that, like, I could easily run a seminar on, because I would have so much that I could say about it. Yeah. And it doesn't just stop with that, because everything kind of leads into another problem, right? So you start with your basic idea. Okay, I want to make this. Cool. You then look at how it would go together, and you go, right, okay, well, now I know that these bits are going to be separate, and this goes into this, and blah, 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 blah. Great, that's nice. Okay. But you then have to start thinking about how you actually implement that. So it's one thing knowing that the mantle is going to be its own piece, but then you have to think about how it actually is going to stay in the position it needs to be. So, more examples. My Wave Mother pauldrons, they stayed on my shoulders with magnets. I had these really strong magnets that I had duct taped to the underside of those shoulders, and then in the actual robe itself, I had sewn in magnets under the fabric so that those shoulders would always sit perfectly in the position they needed to be. And that was that. That was how they stayed there. Yeah, magnets honestly are goated. They are so, so useful. I also used them for... I did a Tears of the Kingdom Link arm, and for that I had like a nylon glove that I had dip-dyed to get the glowy effect, and then I had a load of 3D printed pieces that go around the arm, and to get them to stay there, I had magnets on those pieces, and then under this sleeve I had literally taped to myself a bunch of little magnets so that when I slid the glove on, you didn't see anything, and then I could just put these pieces onto my arm in exactly the right positions based on the magnets that were they were taped to me with, like, you know, the what is it? It's like almost like bandage tape. It's like if you were to have a plaster on, it's that kind of stuff, but without the little pads on it. So it was that. I had a bunch of that I had just taped magnets with, and that was how that entire arm went together, was just magnets and tape. And that was how I solved that problem. So there are loads of different ways of approaching assembling pieces together. Because something to consider would be, if I were doing this, but I wanted these to rotate, that then limits how you can attach things. So if something is meant to move around something else, you can't then have them fused together with magnets, because then they're going to move as one rather than separate. So you have to consider an example of that. When I made my Varia suit armor, way back when I was like, what, 16? The shoulders on that armor, they were actually attached to the underside of the chest plate with straps. And because they were only held on with one strap, they could move about pretty freely. So I could move my arms around without them ever getting in the way, because they weren't stuck. They were able to move. But they were still held in the right position. So if I was just stood still, they would fall back into the right place. So the way that you attach things also matters. Every single time I look at any new build, it always just evolves, and it branches off into all these different considerations you have to start mulling over. And then you get into the whole, okay, so I know how I need everything to go together, I know what it needs to be able to do, I know how I want everything to end up stuck together and what I'm going to use for that. Then you have to start thinking, okay, can I afford this? So, like with my fiberglass armor, at the time, yeah, I could afford to do that, so I did. I can't afford to do it now, so I'm not gonna. And yeah, that's another constraint. All of your builds will end up being dictated by a whole bunch of constraints. That's all that these really are. Everything is a constraint. Because nothing can ever work out exactly as it is in your reference. Especially when it's from games, sci-fi, anime, fiction, right? Anything that you are taking directly from something fictional is going to have elements to it that are just not real. Shocker, right? But I mean that in practical terms. So, a classic example that I love. In Smash Brothers, the way that Link unsheaths his sword is not possible. You physically can't unsheath a sword in the way that he does from his back, because the way that the scabbard and the sword are, you can't get that motion. You can't get that sweeping motion from behind you. It has to just come up. You can't take it out to the side. So the way that actually you get around that when you're modelling the character is it just clips through the scabbard. It doesn't ever come up and out. It just goes through and along the side. But that's something that you then have to think about when you're translating something that isn't real into something that is real. There are certain elements that you won't be able to replicate because your source is not based in reality. Unfortunately, we have physical limitations that we are bound by. As much as that sucks, and I wish it wasn't the case, it is. So there will be elements to any build from a fictional universe that you just have to accept you can't replicate. You can get close as possible, absolutely. But there will come a point where you have to go, okay, well, I actually can't do this, because physics will not allow. And you don't tend to know what those are until you start digging in kind of a little deeper. You go in a little further below the surface, and when you start testing stuff, then you go, ah, okay, I see where the constraints are. And yeah, the Master Sword and the Scabbard motions, that is one of my favourite examples, because it proves that it can't be done. Because to make it happen in the game, they literally had to have it clip through a physical object. It's not possible. So always keep that in your brain when you are trying to replicate stuff. Because honestly, you'll lose your mind if you don't. It is important. So, you know, at the end of the day, don't hurt yourself. Right. Speaking of which, I am gonna go quickly grab more water because my throat hurts. So, give me a bit and I'll be back to talk some more. try this again. So, I'm back, and with a dry wipe thing, so that I can actually draw more stuff and have it bigger, because that's just going to be helpful. So, let's have a look and see. So, if I were to look at this as like a start to finish, why have you ordered a whiteboard? What do you need a whiteboard for? Also, this doesn't count as derailing because it's relevant. So, yeah, okay, but like specifically, I don't see at what point that comes into the degree particularly. I want to know your justification for this. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like there are other ways of doing that, but whatever. I'll let it slide for now. Anyway, I have this, so hopefully I can do more things with it. So, the way that I would approach this... That's what I was waiting... Right. That's the response that you should have had from the beginning, because I feel like that's the real reason. So, am I correct in calling the rest of that explanation cope? You know what? You may deny it, but I'm gonna put a pin in that because it's a maybe. As far as I'm concerned, that is a strong maybe. So, whatever. I'm walking away from it for now. So, as far as planning this specific build, start to finish, right? Yes, thank you. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. Good. Anyway, now that I'm happy, start to finish, the way that I'd look at this is I would go and initially break down all of the component parts of this outfit, of which there are many. So, I would say the easiest way to quantify how many components there are to something like this is to start at one end and work your way to the other. Because you'll get lost very quickly if you don't do it like that, because there are always more aspects to something than you immediately think you should include. So, I would break it down, personally, sort of lower end to upper end. So if I'm looking sort of waist down to start with, then I'd say starting at the shoes, right? So how do you quantify that? Boots. Let's say boots. So you got the boots, but what does that actually entail? So you've got shoes, you've got shoe plates, you've got shin guards. I'm going to say plus calves for that, because they're kind of the same piece. You've got thigh guards, and then there has to be something that goes underneath all of those. So let's say leggings for now, because that's the easiest thing I can think of sticking under those. And then, really, that kind of... So that's less boots, more legs. Let's call it legs. And then I really would be inclined to count the skirt as part of the legs. So I'm going to say skirt as well. Cool. So that's the legs. Then I'm going to say you've got... I'll do those... Yeah, okay. Let's say legs, let's say mid/torso. Then again, working from the lower point, going up. So I'd say, if I'm keeping it fairly basic for the time being, and just doing the core components, not considering all the accessories, because there are many, and they are interchangeable. So this is just the things that are consistent. So I'm looking at the corset, I'm looking at chest plate, then you've also got, now they vary, so I'm going to say gauntlets / bracers, because some of them, they look like they're, you know, you get like the fire gauntlet type things. They've got like the broad kind of conical bit that goes up over your wrist. But then in other references, they have like actual plate bracers that go there. So I think that's a variable. But either way, that still exists in one form or the other. So that is definitely a thing. Then you also have the sleeves, which are a massive feature. And then I'm going to look through the book to see, because what goes up into the sleeves, it's hard to tell whether it looks like it's plated. So I'm going to say it's probably arm plating. And then beyond that, it starts to get into the more complicated stuff. But I will count the backpack as part of that as well. Yeah, I'm just staring at the pictures that I've got on my laptop. But I'd say that works. And then it gets to the... I wanted to do the shoulders separately, but I guess really it comes under mid/torso, so I'll put them on here. So the shoulders, the big old collar, there are lots of little parts to those, but as far as like the core components, that's what that is. So I'd probably leave it at that for now, because then you start to get onto accessories, of which there are many. So the most important accessory for a nun with a gun is a gun. I have a gun, I just have to do more things to it, and then I can start looking at painting it, which will be really fun. But yes, a gun is a requirement. So then we also have a whole bunch of rosary beads. A whole bunch of those. We have various crests and emblems. also a bunch of studs and spikes. That's probably the best way I can quantify all of those, looking at them. Yeah. Without getting into the weeds with it, because it would be very easy to get lost in the sauce at this point. But that kind of is then a summary of all of the individual pieces that make up the whole outfit. And it's not really until you start breaking down a concept that you realise how much goes into something. And this is just the basic summaries. It's not getting into like the super specific aspects of each piece. Like the collar isn't just a collar, it's got the tubes that come off of it as well, and the way that it connects in at the shoulders. Like, there are lots of extra parts. But as far as just covering the basics, it is these. Although I would technically want to stick a wig in on there as well, because that's going to be needed. So, yeah. So this is how I would then start looking at a new project. I would have this in front of me for pretty much the entire thing, and I would go through all of this piece by piece and more or less tick it off as I go. So this will probably just remain as it is, and I will just keep it rolled up somewhere and pull it out every now and then to see where I'm at. So, as far as where you take this information as your immediate next step, that kind of varies. You could then take this as a whole and go, okay, well, I'm going to start at a logical point, so I will start at one end, so I'll start by looking at the shoes and work my way up. And that is a perfectly viable approach. There's nothing wrong with that. It's generally a good idea. However you choose to kick everything off, it's generally a good idea to stick within that realm until that section is then complete. But it depends how you want to section everything out, because... So, one way that I personally like to separate aspects of a cosplay is by material. So, I will always indicate areas that are fabric and areas that are foam, right? So, if I were to say that triangles are fabric, squares are foam. So the shoe plates are foam. Fine. Shin guards, they're also foam. Thigh guards, I think foam is the sensible one. Leggings, fabric, skirt, fabric. That then becomes an avenue that I can pursue, and it becomes its own category, I guess. And the reason I say to stick within one category at a time is because if you chop and change and jump around, it's very easy to kind of just get a little bit lost and forget things that are important because you've not done them for a while. So, an example, if I'm starting with foam, and as I'm trialing various bits and pieces, I'm encountering a whole bunch of constraints and things that I think are going to end up being an issue later on. And so I get frustrated and I drop it, and I go and work on something else. That, on its own, is fine. There's nothing wrong with getting frustrated and going, you know what, I'm going to work on something else for a bit. Cool. However, I don't recommend it, purely on the fact that any troubleshooting you've already done, you are likely to forget by the time you roll back around to dealing with it again. So, if you are a prolific note taker, and you're very good at encountering an issue and documenting what it was and how you fixed it, then sure, you can jump around. But there is a high likelihood that you will jump from something that you'd cocked up into something else, and then go back again and repeat exactly the same mistakes because you've forgotten. So try to stick within one area at a time, even if it's extremely painful to do so. Just because then you're not cursed to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again, because it will be extremely fresh in your brain not to do that. So, personally, I tend to start with the things that I think are going to be the most difficult. So, I tend to start with foam over fabric, because that is going to be a lot more experimental, I guess, as it has been so far. And the reason I start with the difficult things first is twofold. On the one hand, it's the classic, you eat your dinner before you can have dessert type deal. Like, it's just better to get the rough stuff done and dusted and out the way, and then you can enjoy the rest of it. But also, it's mainly a time factor. If you're working to a deadline, which you often are with cosplay stuff, there'll be an event or a convention or a competition or whatever. It's very, very easy to completely lose track of time. Pretty much every cosplayer ever will do this at some point. And I think most will do it forever, and that will never change. So, if you start with the things that you're least sure on, and the things that are going to be the most challenging, then however long that ends up taking is really less of an issue. Because even if it takes, say you're trying to get something done in the span of 6 months, and you spend 4 of those months on this one really difficult aspect, and you're mortified because that's a massive chunk of your time, at least that then is done. It's done, you've managed it, it was a living, breathing hell, but you don't have to factor it into your remaining time anymore. Everything that you've got left to do is stuff that you know you can do, or you have experience doing, or you're going to enjoy doing. So, it's just the most sensible way of playing it. Always start with the harder things, even if it is inherently frustrating, because it is. It's just safer. It's just so much safer, and you're so much more likely to finish everything if you get the difficult stuff out the way first. So that's why I'd always start with foam over fabric, because fabric, I know, I enjoy. It's pretty quick and easy at this point. And it's why when I did all my Fierce Deity stuff, I started with all the fiberglass, because that was going to be time consuming, it was unfamiliar, it was difficult, it was complicated, and it took up, what, a good 80% of my time allowance, I think, in the end, really. Maybe even 90. to be honest. I think, I mean, the fabric took a little bit, because I dyed it all, but for the most part, the fiberglass took the longest. So, yeah, with this, I'm definitely going to be starting, and I have started with the foam, and then I'll look at the fabric after the fact, and that'll be fine. So, the corset is definitely going to be fabric. The chest plate is going to be foam. This depends. It could be either or, because it's either going to be foam or fabric. The sleeves are going to be fabric. The arm, I'm pretty sure they're plated, so they'll be foam. Backpack, I would like to do in fabric, although it's going to be a little bit complicated. So I'm going to do that for now. The shoulders and the collar are both going to be foam. The gun I have as a separate thing, so that's kind of technically neither, so whatever. The rosary beads, also things that I'm going to try and source separately. Again, charity shops. Honestly, you'd be surprised how useful they are for stuff like this. So I'm going to be doing a lot of combing various bits and pieces. Crests and emblems. That's going to be foam or other... Foam clay is probably going to be quickest, but I'd also been toying with 3D printing stuff, so for now I'm going to do that. Studs and spikes that, and then, yeah. So all the accessories are weird, anomalous randoms, but I will figure those out, so that's okay. The shoes, Jen. I'm gonna say... Don't know why traffic is so loud now. It's had all morning to be loud, and it's just chosen not to be. Cool, okay, yeah, so that's how I would quantify all of that. Then, from there, it starts to get even more convoluted. Because you have the option at this point to take individual components away and figure them out as isolated entities. That's fine. But I would suggest taking things away in small groups rather than completely on their own. Anything that is tied to something else, you should take and treat as a whole, because they're going to have to interact with one another. And you might design something to work perfectly as is, but the second you introduce another piece to that, there is then some kind of conflict at some point. A good example would be the shoes versus the shin guards. If you were to look at the plates on the boots, and you just did the top of the foot plates, you made those, they were nice, everything looks good, and they all fit nicely on the shoes that you're using, fine. You'll then move on to do the shin guards. They look good, everything's nice, it all fits as it should do, and then you go to put them together, you could very easily have that lower sort of ankle flange from the shin guards bump into the uppermost piece on the foot. Like that is a very obvious conflict that can and probably will happen if you don't make them at around the same sort of time. So, yes, you have things kind of categorized pretty loosely, but also you still need to categorize it even further into separate... So, proper Porky Pig moment, but what I'm getting at is there is a necessary degree of breaking everything down. the extent to which you break stuff down is not concrete. You don't have to go to the lengths that I like to go to. It's not required. I mean, realistically, you could take, like, just the first 3 lists and just run with that and go, cool, I know what this outfit is comprised of, I'm now going to go and make that. That's doable. But the more you're able to break things down to start with, the better informed you are as you're going along. And that's why I do this to the ridiculous extent that I do. So that when I'm referring back to things, I know what is going to interact with what. And I know what I'm grouping with what. And it's extremely important when you have things like armor that will be interacting with other pieces directly. And if they don't sit just right, and you haven't allowed for things to slide over one another or around one another or to rotate, it's going to completely screw up a bunch of the other pieces, regardless of how nice they are and how well you've made them. So I still think it's important to break things up again into even smaller categories. It just comes down to how you then are quantifying those. So, personally, I would approach this on a practical level, and I'd look at it from... I mean, you can grab it at any point, really. Like, I'm inclined to start from the torso, because I can already look at the corset and know that that needs to be tied with the chest plate. Because you're going to need to have the corset come up high enough that it can sit beneath the chest plate. And then they look like they are part of one cohesive plate. Because as far as I can tell, from all the references I've seen, the corsets do look to be more like leather than metal. Whereas the chest plates are definitely metal. And because I don't want to have a gap between them, it's going to be much easier if I have the corset come up high enough that it can go underneath the chest plate and that just sits over the top. That's the sensible way of having that planned out. So I would do these two at the same time, so that I know that they fit together. So how am I going to choose to mark this? I suppose I can use other colours, right? Yeah. So I would say that and that. Then the gauntlets / bracers are pretty separate. Unless you're counting the arm plates and bracers, in which case that's going to matter. So what I'd say is that goes with that. And then the sleeves, that's going to matter with something completely separate. The backpack can be pretty standalone. That's not... Honestly, that's kind of one of the most standalone pieces. That's not going to matter all that much, because it's going to be separate to the mantle. I don't need that to absolutely align with anything else, so that's nice. The shoulder and the collar, obviously, are going to need to go together. And then really, it depends, because the chest sits underneath the shoulders, but it also is going to matter how high up those plates go in relation to the shoulders. So what I'm actually going to say is at least the collar is going to matter. So yeah, I'm going to say they kind of need to be grouped together in the way that they interact. So yeah, cool. Then it gets complicated, because the sleeves are going to need to interact with the corset, because it's tricky. The sleeves, okay, they will need to interact with the corset, but I'm taking them underneath the chest plate. So really, it's the chest plate that they need to work with more than the corset. But also, if I were to do them as totally separate things, I can make them work after the fact. So I'm not crazy concerned with it, so I might just leave them. I think the backpack is the only thing so far that can be done completely separate to anything else, because it just actually doesn't matter. All of the accessories are going to be separate. Like, I don't need to construct any of these in relation to anything else, bar like the little emblems and stuff on the armour. So actually, I suppose they count. So yeah. And then the studs and the spikes I'll be putting onto other things. It's not how they interact, so they're fine. And then, yeah, so the shoes and the shoe plates and the shin guards. Thigh guards I can do pretty separately. Leggings are whatever. And the skirt is going to be in relation to the corset, to be honest. So yeah. And then that. Thighs I'm not worried. Leggings I'm not worried. Sleeves, really, yeah, it'll be a separate thing. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty reasonable. It looks a mess, but it makes enough sense that I can then take a group and work on a group at a time. So the way that I've been doing things at the minute is I've been dealing with the shin guards and the calves and the thighs, so that I know how all of these are going to interact. So, you know, I have the pieces, and I've been working on those, and I've been keeping those all together. I still haven't got a plastic wallet for the patterns, though. I've been meaning to. Every time I go back in the house, I'm thinking, right, must remember, plastic wallet, and then I forget. Story of my life, to be honest. But yeah, this is how I'm inclined to set things out for now. Then as I'm going along through each individual group, I will then start looking at how things are constructed and how I'm going to attach different pieces to other pieces, and how I'm going to hide the way that things are attached, how I can conceal things like magnets, whether I want to use magnets or if I want to use Velcro or hooks and eyes. There are a whole bunch of different fastenings that you can use, and it totally depends on what is practical for that piece. And when I say practical, I don't just mean, like, mechanically practical. I also mean, like, financially practical. Like, if you just have a load of Velcro kicking around from an old project, I would suggest trying to find a way to use that, rather than investing in new methods. it will depend on what you need out of the final thing. Primarily, like, maneuverability. But ultimately, if you have stuff you can use, I would always suggest planning around using it. Because it's just better to use your resources before spending out on more, you know? Especially if you're a material hoarder like me, and you just have stuff kicking about from, like, several years ago that you've never used. Because, oh, it'll come in handy at some point. Yeah, it can. You just have to actually make it happen. So, you know. But anyway, I'm going to leave this as it is for now. I've got to go and sort some stuff out now that the rest of the world has woken up. And I should be back later, but it's going to depend on how the stuff goes that I have to sort. So I'll try and be back, but if I'm not, then I'm sorry, I got caught up in some less fun stuff. But I hope you have a decent day, and, you know, the carnage is relative. Okay, fair cop. Fair cop. As I say, it's going to depend on, yeah, it's going to depend on how this goes. So, we'll see how lucky I get. I'd like to be here, but it's a little out of my control, so... Sweet. No worries. Thanks for stopping in. It's always a giggle, innit? Let me whack that up. There we go. Right. I'm going to peace out for now, and catch you guys in a bit. So yeah, laters.